Hello, and thanks for watching this video. This video is all about CrewAI. If you're brand new to CrewAI, be sure to check out my other video, which is all about how to get started with CrewAI and goes over the basics. This video is more to showcase a project that I've created using CrewAI that I think highlights, still at a basic level, the capabilities and possibilities of CrewAI. I will quickly review some of the basics as we go along, but I do encourage you, if you're brand new, to check out that other video as well. Before we jump into the code, I want to do a quick summary of what the project is today. So you can see here I have cursor open, and in this file is just kind of a summary of what we're going to do with our crew. So basically we are simulating a debate about a topic in sports. And as part of that debate, we have 4 agents. We have a moderator, a junior debater, a senior debater, and a counter debater. And the names are probably pretty self-explanatory, but basically we're going to have a moderator choose a topic. We're going to have a junior debater who's going to propose a hot take about that topic. And then we have a senior debater, a little more seasoned, experienced, who's going to build upon the junior debater's take and strengthen it, make it better, make it stronger. And then last but not least, we are going to have a counter debater who's going to argue against the hot take. So without further ado, let's jump into CrewAI. And as a quick review on getting started, you can go to my video, but you can also go to this documentation, which helps you get started with CrewAI. You do have to install UV before you can install Crew. This documentation walks you through it. My first video about Crew also mentions this documentation. But yeah, you'll have to install UV and then use UV to install Crew. From there, it is very simple to create and get started with a Crew project. All you have to do is run CrewAI, create Crew, and then the name of your project in your terminal, in whatever directory you want your project to live. So that's what I did. I did that here in Cursor inside of this hot take folder. I opened up a terminal and I ran that command to create this hot take project. So let me cd into that folder real quick. Okay, so once you create the project, it's going to create all these different files and all these different directories. There's a lot in here. We're not going to go over it all. We're just going to go over the files that I had to touch for this project. So some of the most important files in CrewAI to get started, at least, are inside of your project, inside source, and then there's another directory that's going to be the same name as your project. Within that, you are going to have a config folder, so one more level even, and then you will have agents and tasks, these YAML files that define, you probably guessed it, your agents and your tasks. So I'm going to start by looking at our agents file. And basically, every agent needs to have a role, a goal, and a backstory. You can also optionally add in the model that you want to use. If you do not add a model, it will just use the model that you specified when creating your Crew project by default. So, like I explained before, we have a moderator. Their job, their role, is responsible for generating a topic for debate. We give it a goal, which is to generate a scenario about sports, and then we tell it that it should be recent, within the last 30 days. And we give it a backstory. So we say, you're a show host with a knack for coming up with scenarios to debate on, blah, blah, blah. So this is good prompting. This is a good prompting technique. That's one thing I like about CrewAI, is it kind of forces you to follow these good practices. If we just keep scrolling down, we have our junior debater agent, we have our senior debater agent, and we have our counter debater agent. Each one of them has a role, has a goal, and a backstory. I'm not going to read through every single one because I think based on their title, it's pretty self-explanatory. But basically, to summarize, we have the junior debater, who's, as we give it a personality. They're more of a young, fiery debater who gets a little more emotional and passionate. They're going to start by making a hot take about the topic. They're going to use the OpenAI GPT-4.1 mini model. Then we have the senior debater. This is someone who's more experienced, a little bit more wisdom, a little less passionate, and a little more factual and logical in their arguments. Again, using GPT-4.1 mini. And then we have our counter debater, who is going to argue against those hot takes. um, and provide counterpoints and counter opinions. And we also want them to use factual arguments and logical reasoning to perform that argument. And this one is actually going to use a Gemini model. So we're going to have the GPT and the Gemini models sort of competing against each other. And I'll show you how to make sure that you can get both to work here a little bit later. So then I'm going to move over to tasks. We have a task.yaml. It's very similar to the agents YAML, but here's where we define the task. So give it a name, generate topic, and every task needs to have a description, and then the expected output, and then the agent that uses that task. We can have the same agent be used in multiple different tasks, but for this project, it's a one-to-one relationship between the tasks and the agents. So as you probably guess, the generate topic task is going to be done or performed by the moderator agent. And basically we're telling it, we say, so for the description, we say use web search to bring up one current sports topic. And we're saying use web search because I'll show you a little bit later, we're actually making use of a tool that this agent can use to search Google for a recent sports topic. So then in the requirements, and this is all just kind of the prompt, like you would prompt if you were typing into ChatGPT, you must use your search tool. The story must be within the last 30 days. Notice that inside of these curly brackets, we have what's called an input. For any input variables, you put them inside of these braces. And I'll show you how that comes together in another file. And then I tell it kind of what we prefer. And then I guess it says, so if it's older than 30 days, discard it and try to find another topic. And then we give it the expected output, a real sports headline topic from the last 30 days, relevant again to that input. And then we tell it, we assign the agent as the moderator agent. So again, I'm not going to read word for word through the rest of these, but the next task, we have the generate hot take task, which we are assigning to the junior debater, which is there, and it's their job to create that initial hot take, that initial argument or opinion. And then we have the improve hot take task, which is used by the senior debater agent. Again, their job is to improve upon the junior debater's initial hot take. And then we have the counter hot take task, which is done by the counter debater agent to argue against the hot takes. So those are our tasks. So two very important files to remember, the agents YAML and the task YAML. Let's move on to the crew.py file. So in here, I'm going to scroll up to the top real quick. We basically are creating our crew object. And we do that inside of this hot take class. And you'll notice these decorators. We have a crew base decorator. We have an agents decorator. We have a task decorator. Those are used to help us define the agents and tasks and the overall crew itself. So inside of this class, we have a series of methods. The methods tie back to each of the agents and each of the tasks. So as you can see, we have a moderator method with the agents decorator. We have the junior debater method, and then you can see the other two agents. And then we have our 4 tasks as well with the tasks decorator. So going back up, I'll walk you through this first one, and then the rest of them are very similar. So I won't go through each one by one. But for our moderator, inside of that we have these settings. So we have our config, which references this agents config variable, which points to our YAML file. You'll see the same thing in the tasks methods. It'll reference the tasks config variable, which points to the task YAML file. Technically, you actually don't need to explicitly define these. I could erase these from the file and it would still work the same. But I like to have it defined, it just makes more sense to me. But the reason you don't need it is because of this decorator up here. When you have that decorator, it actually creates these variables in the background without having to explicitly define them here. But I like to keep them there because it makes more sense to me. So then all you're doing is you're pointing to that moderator agent within your agent's YAML file. Then an optional parameter is tools. If you want your agent to have access to any tools, this is where you define it here. You just provide your list of tools. We're going to use Serper Dev Tool, which if you don't know, is just a tool that's used for Google search. So it allows our agent to go out on the web and do Google searches. And we said we wanted it to be able to search for recent sports topics. So we are providing it the ability to do that through this tool. And let me click over to that real quick. So here at serper.dev, this is the Serper website. I created an account for free, and it gives you a bunch of credits for free. All you have to do is go here to API keys, create your key, and then copy and paste that key into your .env file. And I'll show you that in just a second. And then verbose equals true. If we leave that as true, that basically just means when the crew is running, you will see logs in the terminal. If you put it as false, it won't change any of the functionality, but you just won't see those logs. So it's up to you whether you want to put that or not. And then I'm just going to kind of scroll through the rest of these agents. And then going down to the tasks, it's mostly the same, but for tasks, you can have an output file. This is where we want to put the output from those tasks. So we have a folder called outputs, and then within that folder, we will put the outputs for each task. So the topic, and it's going to be in Markdown format. Okay, the last thing in here is this crew method, which kind of puts all of the agents and all of the tasks together. So anything flagged with the agents decorator is saved in this variable, and anything flagged with the task decorator is saved in this variable. For process, we are using sequential processing, which means that the tasks will run in the order that they are defined in this file. So scrolling back up here, oops, those are agents. It will go in the order from top to bottom that we defined it. There are other ways to do this, but for this video and for this crew, we are doing it sequentially. And then verbose equals true, that's again those logs. So that class returns the final crew object with all those tasks and all those agents kind of put together. And then we have this main file. So moving over to here, we are bringing in our hot take class from this crew.py file. And what this crew.py file is basically a bunch of functions that we want to run with our crew. So we have run, which is just basically just run it from start to finish. We can train with our crew. We can replay, which is basically just running from a specific task. We can run tests, and we also have this run with trigger function. So we have all these functions that our crew can perform. We are just going to focus on this run function right here, which, if you go down to line 21 right here, we are saying use the hot take object that we import from crew.py, run the crew method that we saw in here. So that creates the crew object, and then that crew object comes with a kickoff method to actually start the crew. And as an argument, we are putting the inputs. And that's, if you go back to, if you go back to tasks, and then go up here, if you remember this current date variable, input variable that's in brackets, that's where that comes from, is here. So we have inputs, and then we have current date. So we need our agent to know the current date when running that task, so it can get a current topic to debate about. Last but not least, before we run the crew, I want to quickly go over the environment variables setup. In here, in this .env file, I'm not going to actually open this one up because it has my API keys for OpenAI and for Google Gemini and for Serper dev. But this file is kind of just a replica. I did .env demo, but again, it's not going to be .env demo, it's going to be .env. This is how it's going to be defined. It's basically just going to have, in this exact wording, OpenAI API key, and then equals your key. And then Google, if you're using Gemini, your Google API key equals your key, and then same thing with Serper. And that's where you'll put your keys. Crew knows to look for the .env file when it's connecting and integrating with OpenAI or with Google or whatever model you're working with, and also with any of the tools you're working with. So without further ado, let's open up the terminal. And it's probably going to make me move back into my CrewAI folder, so bear with me for a minute. Okay, and then from inside of your project folder, you can simply run, you have to be inside of that folder, CrewAI run. Okay, so now we'll kick it off. It's going to run each of those tasks in the order we defined them using the agents that we told it to use. We will see some logs because we set the verbose equals true, and now we can just watch it run. So if I scroll back up, you can see it's starting the execution. It's generating the hot take by running that task. It's using our moderator agent. You can see the prompt that we gave it right here. It's making use of our SERPer tool, which means it's querying. It's running a Google search. You can see that it's using our input date, March 2026. The tool execution is completed. I'm not going to go through all the logs, but you can see it's telling us step by step what each task is doing, the tools that it's using, the agent that is using that task. And then we go here, we keep scrolling down, we see all those tasks, all those agents. It even gives us the output. And let me exit out of that. Okay, so it looks like it's done. So now what we can do is we can go to the output folder, which we told Crew to save all of our outputs, and we can look at what was generated. So quickly glance over the topic. Okay, so it's talking about the March Madness tournament that's going on at the time of this video. So it says VCU knocks out UNC, completing one of the largest comebacks in tournament history. So it's talking about basketball. Then we go over to hot take. And let me close out of the terminal. And it gives a opinion about that particular game. And then we're going to go over here and see the improved hot take. We don't have time to read through each of these. But if you want, you can pause the video and read through each of them one by one. And then let's go and see the counter. And it kind of gives its own opinion about that comeback victory by VCU. So you can see that it stepped through each of the tasks, used the agents we told it to, used the tools we wanted it to use, and came back with some very detailed arguments and debates about a given topic. So that is how you run CrewAI. I hope this was helpful. I hope it was interesting. If it was, please like the video. Please subscribe to my channel. Again, thank you for watching.